Okay, welcome to Berlin Critics Week 2022. I'm here with Azul Aizenberg, who is the director of one of the films we screened, Las PICAPEDRERAS, the Stonebreakers. Hello, Azul. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us and allowing us to have a conversation with you. During the Critics Week, we have presented your film in a program with two others, with a film by Jan Soldat and Masaki Yuasa from Japan. And it was a co-curation, this program, with filmmaker Dea Kulumbegashvili. And like in every evening, we had a long discussion after the screening, which you have already seen. And yeah, for us, it's important to give all the filmmakers we invite also the chance to react to these discussions, because with this one, it was the case that there was no filmmaker on the stage at all. It was a curatorial discussion, which was also a little bit meta. So I'm, of course, first of all, very curious how you felt about this programming and your film being placed in this. But also the conversation itself you saw, which thoughts came to mind, and yeah, share them with us, please.
Well, thank you very much for this invite and for programming my film. I'm normally very curious about curating because I find out to be sort of curator myself sometimes. Like it wasn't a path that I planned, but it ended up like this. For seminars, workshops, and also for festivals a few times. So it is kind of interesting to me to think how you create connections between films, like and also over the years I tend to like defy myself and create connections that I'm not absolutely sure about. And I think that this program, Libertine, like gives me this question. Like I'm not it's not easy to say what the connections are between these three films. I think on the discussion you had on the cinema, it was Scotty, like the three of you was Petra, you and Scotty.
Skadi, Loist.
Ah, um, he said like that he was intrigued by what was this connection also. So I kind of feel that it's interesting to part from that question. No? I watched the films at home, which is obviously not the same. And I watched first the feature film INU-OH, and then last night the Friday Night Stand by Jan Soldat, which I also discovered, like these two filmmakers. I didn't know about them. And well, I feel very, very surprised because you can't make the connection between thinking, I don't know, found footage films, and you can't also make the connection by thinking about a theme. So the connection is like more mysterious to me. But I have like some hypotheses. I don't know if it's right. Hypothesis.
Yeah,
Yes.
hypothesis. Yeah. Go ahead, share it with us.
Maybe like I think if we get a distance from the theme that the three films are about, we can think that they are like approaching different kinds of storytelling, like mostly, and also some kind of discussion with the body, like what happens with the bodies, not only in front of the camera, but in found footage or in animation, like creating from zero a body. No? And that's one thing. And the other thing I thought it's that there are like defying films, like probably not myself, like and any people from the audience will not like be empathetic with the three films at the same time, probably. Particularly, the INU-OH was like very defying to me because I'm not used to animation, and mostly I'm not used to animation in Japanese with English subtitles and lots of music. So it's not important like if I like it or not, but mostly I think that it was like defying. Like I was like most of the time more aware of asking myself what this film is about, what is going to happen, than like into the story. And kind of same feeling happened to me with John Soldat feeling. Um, with John Soldat film, like what is this about? And I kind of like when this happens. The spectator is thinking, where is this going?
So a defying film would be a film which is not so easy to access, or which requires some work from the audience, from the spectators.
Yes, I think. Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about your film, of course, how it relates to the program, and in a way, it's interesting that you're talking about that you're also a curator, because your film is in a way, in itself, like a microcosm of images coming together, which might not be in an obvious relation, you know. And I find this very fascinating how it relates also to the logic of this program, like whether it is ethical or whether it is suitable or obvious to connect particular films, and how something is created in their encounter. So yeah, and I'd be of course very curious to hear like how your own work was with these images, like how your method evolved. And it's not the first film you've been in which you've been using found footage as a method. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about your relation to images and how to assemble them. Yeah.
Well, I started studying filmmaking about 11 years ago and working, and I did some short film, like but fiction short film in university. And it was like after studying when like found footage came to me like with most force, especially the 2 or 3 last years. And I've been also doing I've been dealing like from 2015 with a film that I'm still doing, a feature film about family home movies, my own family home movies. I don't yet figure it all out, but I have this relation with the archive, like that is it's kind of getting deeper, like with the time. So uh, Stonebreakers in particular, uh, start with a more conceptual question, which was like ask myself in as part of a militant left group here, what happened with the representation of like class struggle in my country in particular, but in films in general. So it was like this question that lead myself and discussion with some mates to the story of the Stonebreakers. Like mostly, slightly known here. It's like it's kind of gets my attraction because it's a very long strike, more strike, sorry, more than 1 year strike, but it's like not very mentioned it. So I have done some investigation, and I really like that moment when you don't know if this is going to end up in a film, and it's like the absence of material kind of uh, get my attention, like very powerful, and that's like when I kind of hear the call, like, well, this is the how do you say, desafío, uh, like this is the game that history is like proponiendo. I don't know how to
Proposes, I think.
yeah, it's like a game history proposes, like how to find images for what can be represented.
Yeah.
So I started like literally, yeah, a game, an experimental work with in Premiere in the timeline with some other films that I collect because of in part of my job, which is teach. Like I have all my films in my disc. So I started to doing some tests about how will go this voice, this story with images that are not meant to be. Um, and then also a very important thing is in this experimentation, it appears Alberto Gauna, somebody I was looking a lot for the contact, an email or a phone about this person who was the only person who has done a film which was in YouTube in the 70s about this strike. But
Yeah.
in that film, women didn't appear. That's the first thing I asked him because I had read a
Yeah.
history book that collects all the testimonies, oral testimonies from the women. So the first thing he told me is, yes, I have filmed the women like in fiction, but we have very little budget, very little women. We can get a train for us to film, and so the rushes about that scene were like terrible, weren't well in the final cut. So I put it apart, and then he told me the military came and set up on fire his house because he was like, well, not an official militant, he was an anarchist, but obviously he was in some kind of list, so he had to exile to Spain. And that when I learned that, it's I reinforced the idea that this image was missing, and that became very powerful to me. So that was the moment when I said, okay, there is a film in here. Uh, like if the proper material has like called me, no, something like that. So in that moment, I was already experimenting with fiction films,
Mm-hmm.
like these little pieces who can like make the puzzle of this story. But when Alberto Gauna appears, we have like a very long email exchange, like from that moment 2 years ago till today. We still talk a lot, and he gave me all these photographs of the the tournage, the how do you say
The shooting process of
the
his film,
shooting.
like
Yeah,
set photographs.
yeah,
Yeah.
the set photograph. So in that moment, like it was, well, that's this is great because I can mix both materials. So that's kind of how the process has been.
Yeah, it's fascinating because in your film, like when you talked about history earlier, like the game history proposes us. Um, I think it's fascinating how in your film two levels, two ideas of history maybe come together. Like one would be the political history around this incident, or well, it's not only an incident, a long time frame in which workers were rising up. But then also film history, which has maybe a chronology to it, or national cinematographies, particular ideas of how films have been created or have been shown, in which history they stand. And I feel like to explore the political history, you are like, or to live up to the demands of the political history, you are breaking the rules of the film history. So this is maybe, I'm not sure how you see it, so I'm very curious about that decision of not following the rules of film history, and maybe also your principles of how to break these rules. I mean, there are some scenes in your film in which you're like illustrating incidents of the past through the images of particular films, but how you came to these films and how you decided to, which are the base for your montage, that would be very interesting for me. Yeah.
I like you say like breaking the rules, because it leads me to ask myself what are the rules, like
Yeah.
in film history, in terms of that in Argentina we don't have cinematheque. How do you say in English?
Cinematheque.
Cinematheque.
Yeah. Cinematheque.
We don't have a cinematheque, and the access for any archive is like very complicated. Now there are some changes, and there is the Museo del Cine, Cinema Museum, that it's like opening a little bit and proposing like programs where filmmakers or creators can access to some of the archive, like generating this movement up above the archive. But in general, it's like a Chile member, the colonial thinker says, like the archive in general, it's like, or the state has eliminated, well, like the like these rushes of the film, or the state keeps them as how do you say, a talisman, a jewel, something you can't touch, like you know it's there but you can touch it. So the process of trying to get through any archive here to rethink history is not easy. And also I can say that, well, the pandemics didn't make it any easier, because we were on quarantine while I was making the film most of the time. So I also was very influenced by a film by how's his name? Ne croyez pas surtout que je hurle, de Frank Boves. You Don't Think I Will Scream, I think it's the title in English, in which he uses like very lots of um, uh, short fragments of films. So that's all the like motives that leads me to think that I can tell the story with other fragments of films, which were mostly films that I have in my own digital archive, like the films I use for my classes. But also as I walk on the timeline, I can say I noticed that it was like I was sending me traps, because I um, I I put together some films, or some excerpts that were like very okay with the story, and then because this decision of trying to put only very little excerpts that were like in relation to one and only phrase, one, how do you say, frase, oración,
Phrase.
each sentence, like
Yeah.
each sentence, one image. Then like I was making this puzzle, and some pieces were missing, and that was like the most neurotic process, because then I thought, oh, here I talk about scissor, so okay, I was like searching in all my films where there is a scissor and which kind of scissor and which kind of frame. But that was interesting to me. Like some of the moments of the narration of the story makes it literally with the images, and some are more allegoric or metaphoric. And that leads me to think that like the pure material of cinema, it's like tyrannic, because I can say Caesar and you can imagine any Caesar, but the frame of a Caesar changes uh, by who is filming it, with which film, in which time of the history, and all this. Wait, I will. Well, my dogs.
No worries.
Is it? I get to the point.
Yes, yes, it was very clear. Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about a neurotic aspect of the work. We did one program which was called Footage Fetish, about obsessive filmmaking based on images and found footage, and we also invited we wanted to invite Mr. Bouvet also and thought about his film a lot. And yeah, is this something you would say about yourself, that you're have an obsession with images, or are they more for you a political tool to negotiate history? So where's the power dynamics in your relation with the image?
I like both of I feel identified with both. Yes, I think it's a tool, and I think also in that aspect that we in Latin America tend to think that the films that were made in the 70s only we look at them only as a wow, look at this big message, no, for the masses, for the revolution. And that's of course important, but you forget the aesthetic aspect of what is the relation of the filmmaker with the image and with the world. Like I really like, or I think the most defining thing to do in cinema is think how both things connect. uh, that the films are not a pamphlet or a message, like film can be that, but also but in other way there are political tools. Yeah.
And is this concept we put on your program, the concept of the libertine, or which is maybe which is obviously connected to the idea of libertinage? Is this something you think about, or is this something you feel related to? It's of course a term which also has a history, and I was wondering personally whether we can free that term from its history, because it felt so interesting that the whole concept of the libertinage is based on, in a way, emancipating oneself from a moral dogma of society. And it feels to me more interesting even than the idea of liberation, which might come from the outside. But this idea of libertinage feels like it comes from a moral process within a person or within a group, and they decide to set their own standards. Of course, the term has a very specific history. It's also very much connected to sexual morals, but I was just wondering whether this concept is interesting and whether it can be reinterpreted in an interesting way. Yeah.
It's very dangerous because here in Argentina, right-wing militants are calling themselves libertines. So
very interesting.
it's very, very tremendous, because like the left has been, how do you say, uh, uh, I think it's a moment, I don't know in the world, but yeah, but in Argentina, that the left is kind of lack of its words, like our historic words, like libertine, because the right wing people are using it. So it's complicated. I understand that maybe in Germany or in Europe this isn't happening that this way, but I also think, you know, it happens something very interesting. While I was doing the film, I applied to one thing that it's called the Short Film Lab,
Yeah.
which is like a lab for post-production and distribution. So the film went there. I had some meetings, Zoom meetings, and things like that. And the first activity we had in that moment, I haven't done the post production, and I was like near the final cut of my film. And the first activity we have, it was like with a person which is like an old man from cinema, but which is also a lawyer, and he was talking about like legal stuff. What can you use and what can't you use, or you have to like the rights of the films and the music and the things used for filming. And I was like laughing all the time because I thought like I'm doing this film with more than 100 films, and I don't think that nobody is like demanding me for this. So it's kind of weird because I don't think I'm transgressing anything, like putting anything in danger, and nobody's like coming for me because I use other films. So it's like interesting to think, like, of course we would like to think like left people that we are defying something, but I also find it like something we can laugh about, like a guy is telling that you have to have all these rights and all these papers and all this bureaucracy for doing a film, and then you do it without that, and it's all right, it's so good, nobody's demanding you.
Yeah. There's also a very interesting slogan in your film, maybe as a closing question, to destroy is to create, which is also very interesting in relation, of course, to your film, but maybe also to the program we have created, like this question, what happens to the individual work when we reframe it? Does it change its logics, or yeah, what is this, what is created? And since we are talking maybe also about reinventing concepts, yeah. Yeah, what are you trying to create? Tell us.
I like this because I think that in an individual film like mine, we can like put aside the idea of author. Of course, I spend hours and hours investigating and doing things like I am the author, but I like to put aside like socially and philosophically maybe the idea of author. And I think the same things happen when you put a film on any program, because the audience, especially on cinema, when you can't like put pause and play, and you have like all these films coming to you, maybe you get out of the cinema as a spectator, and you have like all these images mixed also, and maybe you forget something about the film and connect it and make like unconscious connections that are like very very powerful. So I like to think that this is possible in programming and in the films uh, itself. Like, and this is like the most interesting thing in found footage, that you have to like how do you say, preserve
Yes.
something for break it. also, or for deconstructing. It's like I like very much this contradictory movement. Um, the phrase "to destroy is to create" is from Virginia Walton, the revolutionary woman I put on the film. But it was like perfect for that moment. So I don't know. I feel responsible for the film, of course, but I also think that something happened that it's like out of control in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also something what you describe about authorship. It's also part of your method because you're basically negotiating history from a feminist angle, but most of the films you use are not made by female directors, for example. They are like maybe also disconnected from what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, so yeah, it's very, very interesting. Also in relation, of course, to what we just discussed, like whether you identify as a left-wing filmmaker and which concepts you're allowed to use or not, and yeah, or which you might want to align yourself with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was also thinking about this idea of piracy, for example, which has, I think, the term of pirate or the
Mm-hmm.
concept of piracy has within the left experienced a different kind of shift. It has a kind of a very positive connotation currently. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Even the film played at the Ultra Cinema Film Festival, which is a festival from Mexico,
Yeah.
and this edition is called like Hacker Edition. So
Yeah.
I like that also. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that also I was thinking about this before we started the conversation, that the film also played at other more traditional festivals.
Yeah.
So I like also this hybrid path that it's happening, like that the films don't play only in, I don't know, feminist film festival or found footage film festivals, and can like hack literally other types of festivals, other type of cinematography.
There you go. So thank you very much, Azul Eisenberg. I'm looking forward to discussing how we can hack film history in the future more. And I hope we can also have our programs hacked by your films in the future again. It was a pleasure showing your film and discussing with you. Thank you very much. And see you hopefully in the flesh in Berlin soon.
Thank you very much. Yes, I hope the same.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for listening and see you soon at Critics Week.